Working Cows Podcast, episode 364. This episode is brought to you by the South Dakota Grassland Coalition. This episode is also brought to you by Ranch Right.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag Studios, and this episode is brought to you by the South Dakota Grassland Coalition. If you're in the business of managing livestock, you've probably experienced drought, shortage of time, not enough help, and hefty debt. But facing one or even all of these challenges doesn't have to leave you worrying about how you'll make it through another year. Learn how to increase your stocking rates, extend your grazing season, increase plant diversity, retain moisture in your soil, spend less time and money on weed control, and much more at one of the South Dakota Grassland Coalition's grazing schools. During this 3-day intensive program, area producers along with presenters from state and local agencies combine hands-on activities in the field with classroom-style presentations to walk you through the steps necessary to create a grazing plan that suits your unique operation. Reserve your spot at one of the 3 grazing schools today at sdgrass.org. Very excited to be joined today by Hunter Jones. Hunter is with Grassroots Carbon, and we're going to talk to him about the ins and outs of getting paid for capturing carbon in your soil and what it takes to do it and kind of the process of going through that and some of those things. So very excited to be joined today by Hunter. Hunter, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast. Hunter, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited. Glad we got to connect in South Dakota a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I guess where I'd like to start is maybe kind of a broad overview of where you see the carbon market as far as its maturity. Is it new? Is it growing? Is it matured yet? Is there still some progress to be made? How do you see it?
It's been around a while. So, I mean, we've issued credits for 3 years in a row, but it's a young market that is developing. So, there's we at Grassroots are not happy with where the credit price is currently. So we know that it is growing, and it has grown every year that we've been selling credits. So, it's evolving for sure. It's definitely growing. It's getting bigger. More companies are buying carbon credits. So it's definitely a growing business for sure. And wouldn't say it's a mature business yet, but it's definitely it's getting there.
Do you have a sense of kind of realistically where that carbon market should be? I mean, you said you're not happy with it. Do you have a sense of where you think it should be?
I mean, just looking over, in the European markets, they're trading for around $100 a ton, but they're also mandated, by the government. And our programs are 100% voluntary. Nobody's making these companies do it. They're doing it because they want to. So it's all private. So, I would like to see it get closer to that. If we could keep things voluntary and private, that'd be nice, but get higher prices. So, yeah.
Yep. And so it's right around 20 in the low 20s. Is that right?
Yeah. So nature-based carbon credits as a whole sell anywhere, covering row crop all the way to what we're doing, forestry, all that. Range anywhere between, I would say, $3 a credit to $35-$40 a credit. Most of your ranching soil carbon credits are going to trade around 20 to 29, 50, $30 a ton. A ton or a credit, they're the same thing interchangeably.
So we're in the low 20s. They're at 100 in Europe. So there's some room to grow there. And then I suppose it depends, right? Some soils will sequester more carbon than others. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so we kind of look at the 100th meridian straight down the center of the country. Generally, there's pockets on each side that are good and bad, but as you go east, you see more carbon sequestration due to rainfall and ground cover and things like that. You go west, it's more arid, but that's also a double-edged sword because you go east and you don't have a lot of ranches over 500,000 acres. They've been subdivided, and you go west and you have 40, 50, 60,000 acre ranches that are storing half a ton of carbon versus a 500 acre ranch in Virginia storing 2.5 tons of carbon.
Right.
So,
and that's per acre.
yeah.
Generally
per
Yep.
acre. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
right.
And that's just an
right.
average.
But,
Yeah.
So then is there,
Yeah.
the potential is probably less, right? In the West, you'll never, if two guys are using the most well adapted management style for their zip code, right? A guy in, Utah is killing it. He's got the stock density locked in. He's got, the number of paddocks locked in, all that. And a guy in Iowa is doing the same thing. The guy in Iowa is going to sequester more carbon at the end of the day than the guy in Utah. Is that accurate?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, the guy in Iowa has a easier chance. The ground's more forgiving. It's not as fragile. So, the guy in Utah, or, I work a lot in Wyoming. The guys in Wyoming or the Sandhills in Nebraska can't risk overgrazing like you can in the East.
Yeah.
So, yes, they will probably store more tons per acre, but there is a lot of potential for arid climates, just like Alejandro Carrillo.
Yeah.
I mean, he's, I'm sure what he's doing is, I would love to measure it to see what's actually happening.
Yeah.
So, there's the potential's there for sure. It's just, it's a totally different climate,
Right.
obviously.
And on some level, I mean, what you are actually getting paid for, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but as I understand it, what you're getting paid for is what you're adding to what's already there, right?
Yeah, so we do meter deep measurements in year one. We see what your current baseline is. And 5 years later, we do measurements again, meter deep core samples again, and we pay you for what changes from the first measurement to the last measurement. However many tons of carbon that is at the current price for that current year. So, but yes, we're paying you for adding carbon, not for what you already have right now.
Right. And then as I looked over some of the material you sent me ahead of time, and appreciate that, it was helpful. There's kind of an estimated accrual, right? Of this is what we're estimating you are sequestering per acre per year. And so you're getting paid every year based on that estimate. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So, we have a model that our team has built over several years. We have some very good soil scientists and have had some good ones in the past that have made a very good model. So we look at your soil type, texture, all that stuff. We look at your rainfall, all sorts of things. I'm not a soil scientist. I'm a range and nutrition guy. So, we look at all that. We get an idea for, your ranch conservatively can store 0.7 tons of carbon. So that's, a discounted rate, let's say. We'll pay you that years 1 through 4. Year 5, we measure again and we square up. We call it the confirmation measurement. So we get to year 5 and we paid you for 0.7, but you stored 1.2 tons of carbon. We square up at whatever the current market rate is.
When you're doing that estimate, is some of that based on these are the management practices, these are the things that we're changing, these are the, we're going to subdivide paddocks with polywire, so we're going to double the number of paddocks we had before, and so that goes into that calculation of what is actually being what we're estimating we're going to accrue.
Yeah, yep. So we can go we have 2 different programs, but we can look at what you're doing now, how much you can store. We can add in, say you have 50 pastures and you subdivide, now you have 100 pastures. That's a big example. That's a big jump, just an example. We can model all of that and, different movements, different rest periods for different types of soil, for sure. Yeah, it all goes into there. But at the end of the day, you get paid for what actually changes. So the interim modeled rates is just a way for you to get paid, not having to wait for soil samples. So, I always tell everybody that is a conservative measurement, so you don't have to wait. The true stock comes in that year 5 measurement. That's what actually matters the most.
And if I'm understanding it correctly, the programs are a longer term than just 5 years, right? The agreements are for a longer term.
Yeah. So we have 2 different programs. Our older historic program, we've paid out $5 million to date to ranchers as of January 1st. It is a 15-year total commitment from ranchers with a 5-year sampling period. So years 1 through 5 or 5 years of sampling. You can continue sampling on if you want to keep going after that last sample in year 5. You can get sampled 5 years later, or you just simply enter a no tillage clause. So the carbon you stored the first 5 years, leave it in the live roots, leave it in the ground, and we're not going to measure anymore. We're not going to sell any additional carbon. The other program is a 30-year program, measuring every 5 years, and it's 30 straight years of payments. So it's they're similar in their measurements and the payments, the way they work, but they're different in the length of time. And 5 years with a 10-year no tillage clause, or 30 years of straight payments for management.
Was the new structuring, the offering of this 30-year option, was that a response to the market, a response to the way that you saw the program being used, and said, well, there's people out here who tillage they're not going to do that. So, is that kind of how that came to be?
Yeah. So the way that I kind of see this going, or the way that it is the longer term you can tie up the carbon in the ground and guarantee these corporates that, if we can guarantee to one of our buyers that it's going to be at least 30 years in the ground, they will pay more than they will for a 10-year permanence guarantee. So everything in carbon is based around permanence and additionality. So what additional practices are you going to do, and how long are you going to store that carbon? And that's what drives the price up on these things, is the permanence and the story behind it.
Right. And the additionality is only additional to where you started year 1, right? You don't have to, it's not like every year you've got to do a higher percentage or whatever.
No. So the way we do it on our 15-year program, we have a list of practices. You choose 3 of them to implement over 5 years. And then on the 30-year program, it is one practice change that is, quantifiable, that a reasonable person would deem a practice change. So one of the options on the 30 years, we're going to partner with, we have partnered with one of our companies, and we're going to provide some, electric fencing for you or something along those lines. So that would be your additionality, essentially. Is now you can subdivide X number of pastures. So, but the most important thing for ranchers to know is the documentation factor of all of this. We have to be able to document, I have cows in pasture A, they moved to pasture B on this date, they were in here for this long, then they moved to C. And, we need to look at that ranch plan. We're not going to tell you how to do it, but we definitely have to document it.
Yep.
For sure. It's very important.
Sure. And when you're looking at enrolling somebody in one of these programs, is it every acre, or do they get to choose, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, it depends on where you're at. We look at what's going to be profitable, but you don't have to roll that whole ranch in. We have some people that might have a very large ranch, and they're going to do, say, 5,000 acres on one program, 5,000 on the other program, or they're just going to start with, 1,000 acres. Generally, they get their first payment and they call us back and they say, let's go ahead and do the rest of this ranch. That's the way it's worked in the past. But yeah, you don't have to do everything. You can pick and choose. But if you're going to, sign a part of the ranch up, you might as well get paid for the whole thing. It's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, is it, I don't know. I know the answer is it depends, right? But to me, if you can store a ton of carbon per acre, $20 an acre, that's more than most lease payment, or that's in the neighborhood or on the high side of most lease payments in my neighborhood, right? What you're paying to lease per acre. And I know that's cheap, but we're in Western South Dakota, semi-arid environment, 15 inches of rain on a good year, on a normal year, as Brian Alexander says, normal's just a setting on a dryer, right? So
I love that guy.
Me too. But, shout out to the Ranching Reboot podcast, by the way. But, all those caveats being what they are, right? But I mean, you're talking basically you get to use your ranch and you're paid to lease it in some contexts. And maybe because other places can sequester more carbon, it ends up working out similarly where it's almost the lease payment. I doubt it in some of those higher areas, but if it's straight grass in those areas where it's not row crop and it's not $350 an acre cash rent, then maybe you are looking at some of these more marginal areas, the low spots, the wet spots that you can't farm anyways, that aren't part of that lease agreement. There's another income stream. So, that was kind of some diarrhea of the mouth right there. Not really a question, but if you want to speak to any of that, I open the floor for your response.
Yeah. So, as far as the payments go, it's a 70-30 profit share at minimum. One program 70-30, the other one's 80-20. For the time being, they'll probably both be 70-30 before too long, I would assume. But the important things is there's no cost out of pocket to a rancher. So we're going to cover soil sampling costs. We're going to pay for it up front. We're going to sell the credits, and then we're going to have our profit share after that. So year one might be, you're going to have less of a payment in year one than you will in years. You'll have soil sampling costs in year one, so your payment will be less than in year two. So, but overall, over the entire program, I have had people sign up and pay for their lease acres. So they'll sign up with their lease, and they've been able to secure a longer lease with their landlord by saying, I can give you an extra 10% or whatever it may be based on this carbon program, and then they can secure a lease for a longer period of time with their landlords. So that's something that's really helped out some of our growers, is saying, I lease 15,000 acres. I'll pay you an extra 10%. I would never tie it to $1 per head, anything like that, because things change. If there's a bad drought, you're still tied to $2 a head versus 10%. Mm-hmm. I can give you 10% of anything if I have it. I can't give you $2 a head if I don't have anything. So, so you can definitely tie up some leases for longer periods of time. You can pay for some marginal ground. It's a good program to keep working lands working and to make some good extra money. But just the benefits of the payment alone is a small benefit to rotationally grazing properly and things like that. So
I heard, Jerry was a soil scientist in Iowa. Can't remember his last name right now, but he just retired. Mm-hmm. NRCS guy. Anyways, he said that carbon sequestration money is new running boards on your pickup, but getting your grass healthy and productive is new pickup money.
Yeah, 100%. So I tell everyone all the time, like, they see our price, and it's good money for doing something that you're already planning on doing, or maybe changing a little bit on the ranch. It's good money to make. We're not an oil well, so don't plan on oil well money right now. Maybe in the future, but it's infrastructure. We might not pay for 50 miles of water line, but we'll pay for some of it, or we'll pay for some troughs or some, whatever it may be, for sure. But the benefits you get out of having more carbon in the soil, which means you have more organic matter, you have more drought resilience, water infiltration, keeping your soil temperatures lower, having fatter cows, hopefully, and not having a feed bill. All of those things are, those benefits way outweigh the carbon payment. The carbon payment is just the cherry on top, for sure.
Right. Yep.
And the incentive to get there.
Right. Yep. For sure. And the help, like you said, there's some infrastructure help built into this too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So we have partnerships with people like Understanding Ag, which I know y'all are close with them. So on our 30-year program, if you sign up, you're going to get to meet with Alan or one of his folks and talk about making a ranch plan. We're going to cover all that up front. It's very beneficial for us to have you have that training. You might be the best regenerative rancher in the world, but having that extra help, that outside set of eyes, always helps. Yep. So we're going to cover things like that. we've sent some people to ranching for profit in the past. So, yeah, no, we're all about education, getting people trained up the right way. That's very important to us. So there are some benefits, education wise. There's some infrastructure type benefits as well. So
Yep.
it's yeah, it's very helpful.
I mean, even if you are like a continuing education addict and you go to everything you can feasibly get to, you're still not going to see as many different scenarios as somebody like Alan Williams or Gabe Brown or any of those guys see every year. Every year they see more than you'll see in your lifetime, basically, because that's what they do all day, every day. And so there's just a lot of wisdom that comes from that, just seeing so many different things in so many different areas of the country and kind of getting a grasp of how these things all kind of fit together. So that's a huge benefit. So I like that.
I made the mistake of asking Alan where he was most comfortable talking about, talking to ranchers. It was like, is it kind of the Southeast area? I know that's where you live. And he was like, I've worked with ranchers in 17 or 18 countries and he went through the whole thing, and I was kind of foot in my mouth moment. Say, okay, I get it. Sorry. You got this. You've talked to more people than I could ever talk to.
Right.
100%.
Yep. So what about other programs? Will enrolling with Grassroots Carbon, kick you out of other programs or anything like that? It's, EQIP or CSP or any of that?
Yeah. So EQIP's all good. I would say probably over half of our ranchers have an EQIP program going for whatever it may be, infrastructure, brush clearing, things like that. So that's all good. That's good with us. Grassland CRP, all that stuff's fine. The only thing we don't allow is stacking with other carbon programs. Mm-hmm. And that's not really due to us making that decision. That comes from our buyers. One, don't want the complication of potentially, a greenwashing scenario where we're selling the same carbon twice. It's just messy. Just assume not get into it. And then the standards. So the people that make the rules that we follow, like Climate Action Reserve and the Regenerative Standard, they don't allow it because of the same situation of, well, who's saying that the carbon stock is correct? And it's a mess. So government programs, we have no problem with things like that. CSP grasslands, CRP, whatever it may be. As long as you can graze it, nothing prevents you from grazing it, and you're not going to till it up, we're all good with those types of programs for sure. And even with EQIP clearing brush, so grubbing is fine. Taking out woody invasives is all good. Prescribed fire is good up to a certain time before we sample. And we have no problems with any of that. But we wouldn't want you to sign up a place if you're going to take a bulldozer to it next week and clean the brush off and then replant it. Maybe wait a year to roll that pasture in. But, we work with everybody on those types of things.
Let's talk a little bit about the risks.
Yep.
You enroll the whole ranch, have a fire go through. Is that an issue, or is that not going to be an issue?
No, in our contract, you are fully, held harmless with force majeure events, acts of God, things out of your control. I always tell people wildfire, drought, your neighbor catches on fire, whatever it may be, Yellowstone volcano, that one always gets a laugh. All those things, you're protected. So say we have a bad wildfire or a horrible drought in year 3, and you need to wait for ranch recovery. So we can work with the rancher to push back that second sample a year if we need to wait for recovering rainfall and, ranch recovery. It wouldn't be in anyone's best interest to sample right after one of those events. So you would never be penalized for anything like that. We can push the measurement back, wait for recovery. But a risk would be if you turn the whole place into a Walmart or a parking lot. Yeah. Then it's not grazable acres. You've disturbed the soil. You've released the carbon. That would be a breach of contract with some, with a penalty. The other risk really in our program is selling the property and the new landowner not assuming the contract because they're not going to keep it in grazing acres. So if you have a piece of your ranch that you might sell in the next 5 to 15 years, maybe just hold that piece out. If you're thinking about you might sell the whole ranch in the next 5 years, might not be the best program for you. I'm very open about that.
Right.
But if it's a long-term family historic ranch, you're not going to till it, you're not going to farm it, and you're going to do the practices, you have almost no risk under one of our programs with this. I can't speak for all carbon programs, just with Grassroots Carbon. Your risks are very minimal. If you don't own a tractor that's got a plow hook to it and you don't plan on building homes on it, you're pretty safe.
How does the sampling work? How does the sampling work?
Yeah, so it's all through a third party. The buyers and the standards and the verifiers all need a third party soil sampler. So we work with Earth Optics. They're a very good soil sampling team. They've done a lot of our acreage. So I run the rancher sales team. So me and my guys will sign up a ranch. Say we sign your ranch up tomorrow. We work with the soil sampling team. We get y'all introduced to each other. Y'all come up with a sampling plan, when you can come, the ground's thawed out or it's raining, whatever it may be. So then they will come out and rough average, I would say a sample, 70 samples per 1,000 acres, maybe more, maybe less. It all depends on your soil type, texture, depths, things like that. So, we play with, we stratify it out and we see all the differences there, soil types and things like that. And then we do sampling. They are very good. They're very professional. They come out, you can babysit them if you want, or you can say, here's the ranch. You have the sampling plan, have at it. They're very good at what they do. So sampling is very minimally invasive. It's about a 1 inch to a 2 inch core that's a meter deep. It comes out in a tube. They ship it to the lab and it's done.
Yep. And to me, that sounds, there's an immense value in the data that you get back from that. So how much of that do I get access to if you come and do the sampling on my ranch? Is that data as much mine as it is anybody else's?
Yeah, we jointly own it. So Grassroots Carbon and the rancher jointly owns the data. We just ask that you don't sell it to a competitor or one of our buyers or something like that, throughout the contract term. And at the same time, we're not going to say, Clay's ranch stored this much carbon and posted all over the earth. So, we might anonymize data or something along that lines, but we jointly own it. So you have rights to it as well. We just, have some things in there about, let's not tell everyone about it until this contract's over.
Sure. And is there,
but it's all yours.
Yep.
We share it with you every year.
Yep. Is there a minimum number of kind of minimum potential carbon sequestration on a ranch that kind of you need to meet before you can get in the program?
Yes and no. So if you're you're on the side of the Rocky Mountains and you're on a granite rock and you're just not going to store carbon and you're going to do all the practices in the world, it just doesn't matter. It's hard to store carbon in rock. So we're just probably not going to sign up with you. Or if you're a extremely arid ranch in Nevada, I don't want to say anything bad about that state. I'm sure there's phenomenal grasslands there. I'm very inexperienced there, but it's just an example. It's a very desert state,
right.
Very arid. So we'd have to look at it, and it's all going to be based on your willingness to do the practices. But if you're not going to store enough carbon to pay the soil sampling back and then generate carbon credits, then there's really no reason to do it, because there would be no reason to tie your land up.
Right.
So I wouldn't say we have an exact number. We look at each ranch individually. We say that, their willingness might be a 5, their location might be a 1. What can we do in between here? But if you're not willing to do the practices and you live in a desert, we're probably not going to work together.
For sure. I'm just more wondering about like the size, because like I've said before, our ranch, our piece of land is a side hustle, for us basically. And we bring in cattle during the growing season. We have a resident herd of sheep. And so it's not big, but it is something that we can manage. And so I just didn't know if there was like a
acreage size.
Yeah.
So, say 500 acres is our minimum on, most of the country. If you're extremely arid, I would say 1,000 acres.
Mm-hmm.
But I've signed some ranches that are, 250 acres or small, around there. It all depends on profitability and willingness to do the practices, really. The unfortunate thing, not for me, because I don't have to do it. We have a team of operations people that have to do the applications. the paperwork's the same for 150 acres as it is for 150,000 acres. The hard part of that is me going through every individual parcel and making sure it's legitimate. But as far as the application to print the credits, it's pretty much the same amount of work. So if you're going to maybe make $150 after the soil sampling cost, it's probably not worth anyone's time.
Right. Yep.
I hate to say that because it's not fair. I have a small ranch in Northeast Texas that probably would not meet that threshold, but we're going to give it a try anyways.
Yeah.
We're going to see what happens. So.
For sure. Yep. Yeah. And you got me thinking about the fire in the panhandle of Texas. When you said Northeast Texas, you were not in the panhandle. Is that right? Or
no, my family has a ranch an hour east of Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah. So grew up in north of Dallas on the Oklahoma border area. So we call it North Texas, but then you get outside of Texas and everyone's like, oh, you live in Amarillo? No, that's the panhandle.
Right.
That's
sure.
different.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we did have some ranchers in that fire, and they will not be penalized for losing all their cows and losing all their grass. So yeah.
Well, and that, a lot of times from the actual ecology standpoint, while it's a devastation and hard to recover from, sometimes financially and in a lot of other ways, that kind of reset button from an ecological standpoint, I think sometimes helps things along, and so, again,
fire is a natural part of
right
how the plains were developed. I mean, this whole regenerative agriculture movement is about mimicking the bison, and
right.
The bison didn't put out fires, so it's all part of it.
Yeah.
It's all part of mimicking that, and we would never want to penalize somebody for part of nature. So, yeah.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Ranch Right. We've all been there. You watch the videos on YouTube. You've read all the books that you can find. You've listened to some compelling episodes of various podcasts. You're in. Grazing is going to save the ranch. And while that might be true, there tends to always be a bigger problem. A bad gross margin, even with increased turnover, is still a bad gross margin. And with a bad gross margin, if you're grazing better and running more cows, all you're going to do is go broke faster. Don't be a zealot. Focus on profitability. After all, it's possible to out-business a bad grazing plan, but you will always struggle to out-graze a bad business plan. Bad business is just bad business, plain and simple. Don't get stuck there. Ranch Right has a team of financial experts who will help you to focus on profitability and ranching right. Using their actionable financials, you can create generational wealth and become a profitability zealot rather than a grazing zealot. If you're ready to see the power of good business and profitability, head over to ranchrightllc.com to book your free consultation now. What drew you to this work?
I've worked in the equipment industry, so for Caterpillar for a bit and John Deere for about 10 years. And I was sitting in my office in Cleburne, Texas, in a bad drought, and I was not selling any equipment. And they called me. Someone from Grassroots called me and they were looking for a sales manager. And I liked ranching a heck of a lot more than row crop and a lot more than selling lawnmowers for sure. That's just not my thing. So I like cows and I like, growing good beef and all that. So it sounded really good. And I met with them a few times and they hired me on. It's, I don't know, about a year and a half ago now. Mm-hmm. And it's just been, it's been really great. It's been a blessing to feel like I don't know the right word to say, recovering, reformed from taking money from farmers and ranchers. Yeah, I feel like I've reformed quite a bit to let's not fight nature and let's not take all the money from the farmers. Let's give them back something for rebuilding.
Sure.
So it feels a lot better. That's how I came into it. A drought, selling lawnmowers.
Right.
when I came from a cotton picker John Deere dealership in Arizona. It was a big change for me, and I wasn't upset about it.
I don't know anything about cotton, but from what I do know, or what I have heard about it is a pretty tillage intensive commodity. So
yeah, growing a very water hungry, tillage heavy commodity in the Arizona desert was really fascinating, and I learned a ton. But it was a good transition for me.
Right. Well, and I mean, like, think about where we've been at for a long time. And you can go look up the graphic that Steve Kenyon shares frequently. I can't remember whose graphic it is originally, but it shows the curve of the agricultural business, the agribusiness share of profits in agriculture versus the producer's share of profits in agriculture from, I don't know, I think it starts in the 80s or maybe even a little before that, and it goes up from there. And I mean, just the agribusiness profits are where the money is in agriculture. And they basically, it looks like, according to that graphic, that agribusiness, chemical and equipment manufacturers and those kinds of businesses basically keep the farmers solvent, but keep them in business so they can continue to sell them more stuff, right? And so now here's the transition. You are now the good guy showing up with a check. Like, that hasn't been the reality for ranchers and farmers for quite a while, and so that's kind of a fun transition to make.
Yeah, it feels really good, and it's really nice to just not fight nature.
Mm-hmm.
We get to graze our cows and try to not spray everything under the sun and not kill every organism and try to grow more biodiversity above and below the ground. It feels really good. I mean, it's a feel good thing for me. It feels really good. It feels like you're doing the right thing, and it feels like you're doing the right work, and that's really important to me.
For sure. Yeah. God's creation, Mother Nature, however you want to say it, is undefeated, generally speaking, in the long term.
Yes.
So fight against it long enough, and it will fight back. So,
Will Harris says it the best. I mean, I love it.
Yep.
Listening to him talk about it. It's perfect. It's just
Yep.
quit fighting nature. It's
right.
You're not going to win.
Yep, for sure. Did you have to go through some education on this front, or did you have some education in your pocket that kind of helped you along and starting to understand what's going on under your feet and the soil and all that?
Yeah, I have an education in it. I have a master's degree in animal science from Sul Ross State University in Alpine, Texas. And I have undergrad in animal science with a focus on range and wildlife management from Angelo State in West Texas. So I did a lot of time in the range with our professors looking at range plants and cows and things like that. But, regenerative, heavy, high density, low frequency, adaptive grazing wasn't taught that often. It was a lot of, Alan Savory came through here in the 80s and made everyone in the desert do a wagon wheel, and they all went broke. It's like, they weren't adaptive. They were too prescriptive. So
right.
I did have an education on it, but it did take, I went down a wormhole. I went down this weird rabbit hole of moving my cows. My brothers and I talk all the time about moving our cows every day, moving them every couple of days. What do we see the difference? And then just reading like Dirt to Soil and some of Dale Strickler's books and some of Gabe and Alan's and Carbon Cowboy TV. I just went down this rabbit hole, and that helped more, as much as anything. Yep. So Peter Bick's films have been very eye-opening.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Yeah. So
yeah, I've come to the conclusion. Roland Cruz was the first one to help me make this conclusion, and then I put my own spin on it recently. But if you increase the turnover on a business with a bad gross margin, you're going to go broke faster, right? So if you don't figure out your business, the business side of your ranch, grazing more cows is actually a bad thing, right? If your business is bad and you are, selling calves for less than it costs you to raise them, having more of them, which good grazing will allow you to do. Having more of them means you go broke faster. And so the way I've started to say it is it's easier to outbusiness a bad grazing plan than it is to outgraze a bad business plan. And so, we got to get the business right. Then we can make the grazing, get the grazing humming. And about the time you have the business right and are starting to really get the grazing humming is the time when you call Hunter Jones at Grassroots Carbon and say, hey, we're about to start doing some new practices. Would you want to come on board? Right.
Yeah. Or, my favorite thing when I hear people say it, I was on a ranch in outside of Lusk, Wyoming last week. And I got in the guy's pickup truck and he says, now I don't consider myself a rancher. I consider myself a grass farmer.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, man, we're going to get along so good. And we did.
Yep.
We drove around and we talked about warm season, cool seasons, how he moves, his rotations. I don't come back into the same spring, summer pasture, the same one every May. I alternate. And then he was like, it's crazy because my feed bill's significantly lower, if anything. I feed a little bit in the winter. But, it has definitely changed the way that their ranch has ran. And just if you consider yourself a grass farmer, you're ready for a carbon contract. So that's pretty,
perfect. Tell me about the team at Grassroots Carbon. What's kind of the size of the business and some of those things?
Yeah, so we're growing. The past few months, we've hired quite a few new people. So my sales team, I have two guys under me, Jack and Taylor, and then we cover the lower 48. So that my team will be growing in the future. Then we have the operations team that does all the applications, the sampling, the payments. They do the important things. Like we get to be out there in our cool jackets, being the fly boys, going out and taking people to lunch and dinner, and they have to do the real important things that actually get you paid. And then we have, that's got our scientists and everything in it. And then our buyer or seller side that sells the credits to the corporates. And then we own Pasture Map. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Pasture Map.
Yep.
That's under our Grassroots Carbon umbrella. So we have a couple people doing that as well, Molly and Kim. So that's kind of the rancher success side to make sure that, your practice changes are being implemented and you're documenting them and trying to make that easier for you if you've never documented anything. That team's in place to really help you there and get your pasture map up and going and tracking and logging. So then we have a group of developers over in Poland that fix the app and fix the websites, and they're phenomenal. They're a great team. So all in all, we're not a big team. We're based out of San Antonio. I would say, I don't want to lie, I don't make it to the office a whole lot. I live in Fort Worth. So I think we're pushing 20 people, maybe 25. I don't want to lie to you, though, around there, less than 30 for sure. But we're growing rapidly. We have a lot of carbon credits to sell, or we have sold a lot of carbon credits. Now we have to go out and get the ranchers to fill the orders. So that's a good thing about our program is a lot of our ranchers, when you sign up, we know where your credits are going. They have a home. So it's really easy. It's not a delay on us finding a buyer. We have the buyers lined up. Now it's getting the ranchers, which we've done a really good job of recently as well.
Cool. And so, that was my next question. The pinch point. Every business has a pinch point. And right now you're talking to the right audience for your pinch point, it sounds like, because you've got the interested corporations that want to buy the carbon credits or maybe they're already sold. Now you just got to find the acres to sequester the carbon in, right?
Yeah. So the buying side it's very active. It's very good. The supply side is really good too. We consider ourselves supply, so we're supplying the credits. But yeah, I mean, the education part of it, when I started a year and a half ago, was the biggest pinch point. Going out there and telling ranchers or educating them on what a carbon credit is, why would Google want to buy a carbon credit from me, and all of that. I think we're getting past that for the most part. It's been around. It's been on enough podcasts. It's been on enough NRCS meetings and grower meetings that now people generally know what it is. It's not a fresh call explaining what a carbon credit is anymore. that was a big pinch point. I feel like we're past that, thankfully, to now, getting ranchers signed up. So we have a very easy process to get you signed up. It can take a day, or it can take as long as you want it to take. So if you got a big board, we'll come and pitch to your board if we need to. If it's just you and your wife, we'll come talk to you, whatever you want to do to make you comfortable with it. So yeah, definitely getting ranches signed up is our biggest goal. We've got a lot of credits sold and waiting to be filled.
Can you run through the pitch there on the, give me your elevator pitch on what is a carbon credit? Why would Google want to buy one?
Yeah.
Kind of some of those things.
Yeah. So I always start off with, what is a carbon credit and who's involved in the program or in the process. So a carbon credit is basically the simplest way to put it, 1 ton of carbon stored in the soil. Sequestered from the atmosphere, stored in the soil. So every time we measure 1 ton of carbon, that equals a credit. And we're selling those from $22 to $30 right now. And then who's involved in the process? People are always curious. So you have the rancher, then you have the soil sampler, you have the broker, which would be us. We're the guy that's making and selling the credit on your behalf. And then the verifier. So the verifiers have to verify that this ranch is doing the practices, the science behind this is all accurate, everything looks good, they verify it. And then the registry is the one that basically puts the stamp on it, and they're the trading, like the bank essentially, where the credit's going to be traded. And why would these companies want to do it? In the US, it's voluntary. So they all have different reasons. So one of our buyers, HEB, wants to buy Texas carbon credits because that's where they buy their beef from. We have some other buyers like Nestle that want to buy within certain radiuses of certain processing plants where they buy their beef from for all of Nestle products. Nestle owns a ton of companies, and they want to do it that way. And then other companies, I can't speak for everybody. Some of them may just want to offset. We have 50,000 trucks on the road, and we need to offset their emissions. But right. No one's making them do it. It's voluntary. They just maybe want to get ahead of the curve if it does become mandatory. And then other companies want to do it, their board wants them to do it because their consumers want them to be carbon neutral. There's a lot of people that will buy certain more expensive types of products because they're carbon neutral or carbon negative or whatever it may be, better for you, better raised, things like that. So it's a mixed bag of why they're doing it. But the most important thing I always tell ranchers is why they're doing it doesn't matter as much as the money they're going to give you is real. It spends, and they're not going to come onto your ranch and tell you how to do the management practices. Nobody from any of our buyers, they might want to come out and hang out with you, but it's not without me or one of our teammates. It's different why they want to do it, but the money's real. It's legitimate. It's all measured. It's all verified. Everything's legit. So
how many times a year, say, will somebody end up being on my ranch if I'm enrolled with Grassroots Carbon?
Yeah, so years 1 and year 5 for sure. We're going to come out and do soil samples. In the meantime, if me or one of my guys are in the area, we might come by if you're around. But we try to leave you alone. We're very minimally invasive. We want you to, you run your ranch, you do the best you can do to store the most carbon. We're going to stay busy selling the carbon for the highest price we can sell it for. Twice in 5 years, plus if one of us wants to stop by and see the place, or if you ask for us to come by, that's about it. We don't come out there except for sampling, unless you have if you want to invite me on a mule deer hunt, we'll work that out.
Whitetail at my place, sorry.
That's perfect. Yeah. That's good too.
Turkeys too. I think what I understand is that the market determines the payment, right? It's not you're locked in at the price that it was in year 1. If by year 5 it's 30% higher. Is that true, or is it?
That's correct. So
okay,
for our company, I'll only speak for Grassroots. I know some other carbon companies will pay you a per acre or a set amount per year. We pay you for everything you store at the current negotiated price for that year, because there's not a commodity price right now like there is for live weight of cattle or cotton or whatever it may be. So one day, if there's a market on the Chicago market, Mercantile that's traded soil carbon credits, we'll trade off of that. But right now it is, we renegotiate our price every year with our buyers, and we give our ranchers that price. So this year the price is $22.50 or $29.25. Next year, if it's $40, we're going to split $40. So we don't lock you into a price. We do have a floor protection at $16.50 floor, but there's no ceiling. So if it goes to $200 of carbon credit in the next 2 years, we're going to split that. Yeah. So we always want to share the upside, but have a protection on the bottom as well. So
cool.
It's important, at least for our company. That's one of my biggest sales pitches is we will always share the upside with our producers. Yeah.
Yeah, that is cool. Hunter, I appreciate your time today. Anything else I should have asked you? Something I missed?
I can't really think of anything. We covered a lot of it. Just if you're willing to do the practices, you're already doing rotational grazing, restoring your soil, you should get paid for it. You know, row crop guys have had a lot of help for a long time from maybe the government or other things. It's ranchers' turn for a win here, and it is private. It is not a government money, so that is a big win for the ranching community. I'm very excited about that. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Hunter, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And y'all can get a hold of anyone at grassrootscarbon.com. You can submit an application, or you can reach out to me or one of my sales team. It's just, hunter.jones@grassrootscarbon.com, or you can submit a form and we'll get to you. So we're pretty easy to reach.
And we'll have links to all that in the show notes page today, workingcows.net/364. So workingcows.net/364. You can find links to Grassroots Carbon and all that and get started.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm glad we got to do this.
Yeah, me too. Very good stuff there with Hunter, really practical, and appreciate, just his transparency and some of those things. So encourage you to get a hold of them if you're interested in learning more about getting paid for capturing carbon in your soil. Next week on the Working Cows podcast, we're going to talk to Christine Root over at Regenified about some of the work that they're doing to just verify the regenerative practices and supply chains that can get people regenerative food in their pantry and in their refrigerator. So really excited to pick this conversation up with Christine Root, where we started it a while back with Solar Shamarini and Doug Peterson. And so looking forward to next week on the Working Cows podcast with Christine Root. We'll see you again real soon.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.